during the meeting under section 14.13 of the procedure bylaw if attending virtually. The external members of the committee can access the speaking queue by clicking the raise hand icon on WebEx or raise your hand. We acknowledge that we are on the unceded homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, and we thank them for having cared for this land and look forward to working with them in partnership as we continue to build this great city together. I also want to take a moment to recognize the immense contributions of the City of Vancouver's staff who work hard every day and help make our city an incredible place to live, work, and play. Clerk, may I have a roll call, please?
Yes. Councillor Fry is sitting in the chair. Councillor Hardwick.
Present.
Councillor Weep. Councillor Bly.
Present.
Councillor Kirby-Young.
Present.
Great.
Archie, External Representative Archie Johnson.
Present.
And External Representative Karen Ann Keatley.
Present.
The committee meeting has quorum, Chair Fry.
Thank you, Clerk. Before we begin, I have some announcements. Any comments on the agenda item can be sent to the committee using the web form on the city's website. The link to that form will be tweeted out at Van City Clerk. I also want to note the City of Vancouver's longstanding commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion, including utmost respect for all genders. I remind committee members that when addressing speakers and staff, we will avoid using gendered honorifics and will instead refer to the person by first and last name, role, or title. There are 3 items of business on today's agenda, 2 reports and 1 staff update. Number 1, the first item on the agenda is whistleblowing, reporting, investigation, and protection. I would like to now invite Mike MacDonnell, the city's Auditor General, as well as Andrew Nicklicki, the city's Chief of Human Resources, to introduce this item.
Oh, thank you, Chair. And I'd like to thank the committee members for their support of the recommendations that were in the whistleblower study that was brought to this committee in its April meeting. You'll appreciate that developing city policies is not normally the purview of an Auditor General. And so quite appropriately, the City Manager's Office with Human Resources and Legal are taking the lead, but I'm very much involved in the conversation as we're moving forward. This is an exercise in good faith on the part of all of us, and I fully accept the city's representations that are in this memo at face value. And I look forward to working with the city as we're going forward to bring the council's recommendation to life with respect to revising the whistleblower policy. I think that is really all I'd like to say on the topic. Perhaps, Andrew, if you wanted to add anything. I think, okay.
Oh, sorry. No, nothing further from me. Thank you.
Great. Are there any questions?
Chair, this is Councillor Bly. I'm just wondering if I could be put on the queue, please.
Sure. Councillor Bly. Oh, thank you, Clerk. Councillor Bly.
Thanks very much. And I just wanted to note and just thank both city staff and our Auditor General for the work. And what I'm looking for is just some clarity around timelines in terms of a commitment for updating the policy, when we can expect to see that.
Yeah, in terms of the timelines, we're going to get started on this as quickly as we can. We have a couple of other policies that we're currently working on with respect to respectful workplace and the code of conduct. All these policies, as written, currently sort of interplay into each other, so we've got to disconnect them and write them accordingly so they can sort of make sense and stand on their own. So that's going to take us a little bit of time. As well, what we do generally, just as good faith with our partners, is all policies that have to do with employment, we sit down and discuss with our unions and our staff associations. So as we can appreciate with summer and vacations, that likely will not be possible until we get into September, October. That's why we've committed to come back to this group by October with sort of a progress report. I can't give you any guarantees that it will be done by that time, but we are certainly going to be moving forward to try to do this as effectively and efficiently as possible, and hoping that by October we may be done, or at least we'll be in a position to give you a firmer date on when we'll be completed.
Okay, great. So if I was just to reflect back what I've heard, and I appreciate that there is obviously a number of stakeholders that require engagement, and sort of timelines in terms of how quickly that can happen is unclear at this time, but there will be a progress report back to this committee in October. And um, Chair, if and correct me if I'm wrong, um, to our Director of HR, do we know when our meetings, when this particular committee as constituted prior to the election, how many times we will be meeting before October 15th, if at all?
I believe that might be a question for the Auditor General. Mike?
Oh, thank you, Chair. I believe the schedule that we had set for the committee at the outset was this was going to be the last meeting prior to the election. And so it'll be a new committee that would be reconstituted after October 15th.
Okay, that's what I thought. So chances are this committee actually won't get an update in August. So I just want to make sure that what staff are suggesting in terms of time frame lines up with um, obviously the mandate of this particular term, and what we can expect. So I wonder if there's any revisions or edits to staff's comments in terms of timeline based on that.
I'm not certain. I should talk to Mike about that, but in regards to, there may be a ways and means of doing it by memo if that's appropriate. If this is the last meeting and there is no way for this committee to meet again prior to, but those are just my thoughts. I should talk to Mike about that.
Okay, so that's helpful. So I think this is just one quick follow up, if I still have time, Chair, is
You do.
whether so based on that, when we look at a work plan, we typically sort of start with, of course, there's a lot of variables we cannot know for sure related to work plans. Generally speaking, though, we would say, you know, some sort of aspirational timeline, whether it's 6 months out or 9 months out, and then we're working our way backwards to hit some of these milestones of engagement. Is there any sense of what that end result type time frame would look like that gives the public some certainty around um, around this particular work related to the whistleblower policy?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand. It's your question.
My question is, whenever a work plan is set out, and maybe this is just the work that needs to be done and can be updated to the committee in future, is some sort of time frame, recognizing we can't control all the moving parts, but what I see is the next step, which is around October, November, perhaps. But what does that longer range commitment look like in terms of having this policy updated so that the public has some certainty around that? So shooting further out is what I'm saying, because clearly it's not going to be October, November.
Councilor Bly, the Auditor General is just conferring with Andrew Nicklicky.
Just, I can answer that question generally, and maybe Mike can be a little bit more specific. What we normally find on policy review is beginning to end anywhere from 9 months to about 15,
Okay.
depending on the complexities of the policy. So I think what we'd like to do is, as we continue to work on this policy and put together a structure for a working group and a steering committee, is to map that out in the sense of, what is our completion date? going to look like as it relates to the work that needs to be done, and also where the other policies are. I suspect the respectful workplace policy should probably be done in the next couple of months. And we've just started work on the code of conduct policy. So when we overlay all that, I think we'll have a better idea, and I appreciate the importance of commitment to time, but I don't have a precise answer for you yet.
Yeah, so no, that's very helpful. I'll leave it there. I think the 12 to 15 month time frame is just for those that may be paying attention to this process that aren't familiar with the complexities of all these overlapping policies. Putting some sort of guide rails around timing is a really important piece, I'd say, to the public's um, to sharing information with the public that doesn't overcommit us, but just gives some appropriate, as I say, guide rails in terms of expectations in terms of timing. So I'll leave it there and reserve any final comments for when we're done. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Hardwick.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to confirm from that we are just receiving this report for information and that there is no action required under this report.
That is correct. This
In
is,
that case, can I move that we receive the report for information?
sure. Thank you for that, Councillor Hardwick. And seeing as this doesn't require a decision and we've received it for information, I guess, do I need to formally do a motion for that? Or is it, the script says no?
Okay.
Seeing as we have an emotion, any, all in favor? Any opposed?
Okay.
Great, okay. So we received that for information and moving on to item 2. The next item on the agenda is amendments to the City of Vancouver policies. We have the Auditor General here to introduce the item.
Oh, thank you, Chair Fry. We have 6 proposed amendments to council-approved policies. The first 4 are entirely administrative in nature, adding the Auditor General and in some cases the Deputy Auditor General to definitions of policies related to procurement, disclosure, travel, and purchasing cards. So the first 4 are really entirely housekeeping in nature to recognize new positions in the city. The last 2, the city amendments to the city's media relations policy and the social media policy, are small changes, but to me they're quite significant. These policies provide guidance to city staff on processes and procedures for interactions with the media and on social media, and contemplate oversight and control by the city's corporate communications office. Such control and oversight by city staff is inconsistent with the operation of an office that's independent of the city's administration, and therefore I'm asking council to exempt my office from them.
Great, thank you, Mike. We do have a recommendation in the report that the Auditor General Committee endorse the Auditor General's recommendations contained in Appendix A of this report and recommend the policy changes to council for approval. Before we ask somebody to move this, do we have any questions?
Hearing none, move the recommendation.
Oh,
Second.
sorry. I do see Karen Kelty raise her hand, so.
Okay.
Just a question, and I'm not sure about it, but Auditor General, does that mean you'll be developing your own policies for staff in this area?
Thank you for that, Karen. Yes, and in fact, I already have policies in place for my staff in relation to these 2 areas.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Thank you, Mike. Okay, so seeing no further questions,
Move the recommendation, Chair.
I heard a moved by Kirby Young, second by Hardwick.
Yeah,
Oh, we don't need a
Just
seconder.
clarifying, we don't need a seconder. Right?
it's committee.
Okay, great. Any discussion? Seeing none. Just a reminder that any council member whose video is disabled will be marked absent for the vote. So we are about to vote on this. So
Rebecca.
Councillor Bly. Thank you. All in favor?
Yay.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, that passes and concludes item 2. Our final item is Office of the Auditor General Status Update. And again, we have our Auditor General here to introduce the item. Mike?
Thank you, Chair. With today being the last scheduled meeting of this Auditor General Committee, I wanted to take a moment to provide you with an update on my progress against the goals I set out in my annual audit plan back in January. Next slide, please. So as you may recall, there were 4 goals. 1, to make the office operational. 2, to produce objective, high-quality audits in accordance with Canadian audit standards. 3, to provide city departments with objective and helpful recommendations. And number 4, to produce a positive return on investment for Vancouver taxpayers. Next slide, please. There are 3 key performance indicators under Goal 1. The first being the number of staff hired in 2022, and the target for that was 8. Clearly, this is the most important input to making the Office of the Auditor General operational. And it's well known that the labor market conditions have been, shall we say, challenging. Nonetheless, while it took quite a while, quite a bit longer than I had hoped to bring people on board, I'm really pleased to report that we're very much on track with this. We have 6 audit staff in place, with a 7th who starts at the beginning of September. And on Wednesday, we posted for the position of an administrative assistant. So that means that we should be very much on track to have the office fully staffed very, very soon. So I'm pleased with that. The second performance indicator was to complete the physical office setup, and the target for that was by the end of Q2, so June. This is not on track, though some progress has been made. Floor plans have been prepared and a building permit application has been made. But REFM's latest forecast for completion of renovations to our city-owned premises is at the end of Q3, so September. It's moving forward, but just not quite in the timeframe we had hoped for. The third KPI is for getting our foundational components in place, so things like professional engagement manual, which is my instruction to staff on how to conduct the audits. It's also a requirement under Canadian audit standards. Policies that alluded to earlier. We also have an HR competency framework that's specifically targeted at the competencies for audit staff. So we have then instructions for staff how to do their work and a clear communication of expectations for how they will perform and how their performance will be measured over time. We're developing audit templates as we're going through our first set of audits, and we'll be doing comprehensive training once we have all of our audit staff physically in the building in September. So very much on track for KPI 3. So next slide, please. Thank you. Audit reports are the principal output from our work and the primary means of communicating to you and the public. Under the first KPI, the plan was to release 3 reports this year, and to date I've released 1 study on whistleblowing. While that wasn't in the audit plan, it was requested by this committee, so I think we can count that as 1 report. Currently, we have 3 audits in progress that, assuming all goes well, we'll be able to release before the end of the calendar year. The first is an audit of building permit fees. This was in our original audit plan. Planning for this work is complete, and we'll be commencing field work next week. As we were gathering information, though, to scope out the work, it became apparent that there were broader issues related to permit fee cost model, and that impacts a number of different revenue streams. Under the Vancouver Charter, the city can collect fees for certain services to recover the cost of delivery, the doctrine of user pay. We wanted to have a closer look at how costs are calculated and have scoped this out as a separate audit to be conducted concurrently with our examination of building permit fees. So while this was not in the plan, it seemed like this was really the ideal time to do the work, which I think is fine. I do believe I did say to the committee that the only thing certain about the 3-year plan was that it was certain to change. And I think this is very much in keeping with that. Lastly, we've begun planning the audit for the audit of furniture procurement, which was in our audit plan. It's still in the early stages, and we're gathering information and talking to staff from the city's purchasing, facilities management, and human resource departments who all had input into those, who have input into those decisions. Second KPI is in relation to inspections by the Chartered Professional Accountants of British Columbia, who was my regulator. We've been in touch, and they're ready to go to inspect our files for our first audit once it has been released and is out there. So we're doing pretty well under Goal 2. Next slide, please. Thank you. Recommendations. Goal 3 is really focused on recommendations my office will be making to city management through our audit report. So I'll have some relevant information to report here at the end of the year. However, the whistleblower study I presented to you in April contained 2 recommendations for Council's consideration. This committee took these recommendations and strengthened them before recommending them to Council. So under the second KPI, I'm recording 2 for 2. Which is exactly the kind of performance that we were looking for. And of course, that resulted in the first item on today's agenda. Okay, goal 4, achieving a positive return on investment. This will be measured over 5 years when we have data on both the cost and the cost savings side. However, since I came to this committee with my initial budget request last November, I thought I should circle back with information on the expense side. Council endorsed a budget of $1.6 million for the Office of the Auditor General in 2022. Due to delays in hiring and consequently in starting our audit projects, I'm forecasting the office's expenses will be a little more than $300,000 below budget. This relates entirely to salary expenses and savings from delays in getting audits started with expenses related to advisors and consultants. So I'd like to conclude by thanking Mayor and Council generally, and this committee in particular, for their support of my office and of me as the office has been brought to life. I thank you for your confidence that you placed in us, and I look forward to delivering on your expectations in the coming months. So, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Auditor General Mike McDonnell. Are there any questions? Councillor Hardwick.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Mike. First of all, the slide deck that you shared with us, will that be available on the city's website?
Yes, it will be.
Thanks very much. And I just wanted to say a personal thank you. I've just been going back and thinking about the sequence of events that brought us to where we are today, especially since it's been identified that this will be our final meeting of this particular committee during this particular council. And it was early in our term back in the early part of 2019 that the impetus for the establishment of the Office of the Auditor General began. And as we finish July, I reflect on having spent August meeting everybody in the Canadian Audit and Accountability Foundation and doing the homework, which led to the October 2019 motion that brought us forward. And I just wanted to also acknowledge the other members of council that have been part of this process, because we went through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 motions, I think, moving this forward sequentially, where we formed committees. The committees worked together to do the research. We brought on the Canadian Audit and Accountability Foundation to do research and provide recommendations that became bylaws, which ultimately led in August last year of identifying Mike McDonnell as our inaugural Auditor General. And if there's any one takeaway for me personally over this course, the course of this term, is how all of you, I'm looking at those of you on the call and others, have worked together through each stage from recruitment into the current operational aspects of the Auditor General. So thanks. I think we can all look back on as a success on where you've taken it now, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hardwick.
Thank you, Councillor Hardwick. Councillor Kirby-Young.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thank you very much for the update. The question that I have is really with respect to the outputs on kind of goal 4, Mike, that you had shared, and those 3 audits with the expectation of delivering them by December. And my question is whether or not you feel committed to that timeline, or if you see any risk or other factors that could impact that. And I ask that question in the sense that I know council's anxious to see it, but I know the public are anxious to see sort of it becomes real, right? When people see the audit and the public can see what the outputs of the office are. I'm wondering if you can comment on if you feel solid about that timeline, or there are other factors that could jeopardize it.
Well, thank you, Councillor Kirby-Young. whenever the audits are ready, I'll be holding on to them until such time as the election's completed and the Auditor General Committee has been reconstituted. So the expectation is that the 3 audits will likely be released in fairly quick succession, likely end of November or probably more likely in throughout December. There's always risks as we're moving forward because we're still in the very early stages of 2 of the 3 audits, that there may be unforeseen circumstances, and that's really impossible to predict. We don't know what we don't know when we enter into these projects, and that's really the whole purpose of doing the audit is to learn and to discover. That being said, I think the topics as we're scoping them out, we're deliberately keeping them tight so that they don't expand and take a lot longer than we're expecting. So the expectation at this point is that delivering all 3 before the end of the calendar year is quite doable.
Okay, that's great to hear. And then follow up on that is with respect, I'm wondering if you've factored in or if in your engagement with staff, if they shared the normal fee review process, because typically those fees are adjusted on an annual basis, whether it is for normal inflationary adjustments or if there's any acknowledgement with respects to factors. What could be market assessment, perhaps fees are higher in a particular category when there's a new type of permitting introduced and they level over time. And so council, typically around the time that you would be delivering those reports, would be setting fees for the following calendar fiscal year. So I'm wondering if there's any consideration given to that, because I'm just thinking about syncing up of potential recommendations coming forward that might impact an approach to how those fees might be adjusted.
Well, I really can't control that particular piece of timing, but our audit process is quite transparent with those who are being subject to the audit. So while the report might not be released until December, the substantive findings and recommendations will be shared with and discussed with management long beforehand. And it's under the no surprises rule that I've spoken to this committee about, and I've spoken to city management about a number of times, that when our reports come out, there are no surprises in that sense. So any impact that recommendations or findings that we might have could be taken into account before the report is actually released.
Okay, that's helpful to know. And then I'll say in closing that I appreciate Councillor Hardwick's drive in setting up this office. Very happy to support the process and part of it. I'm actually really looking forward to seeing the first audit. And so hopefully, depending on what happens in October, I would love to be back on this table to receive our first audit and be having this conversation again. But I really appreciate all the work that you're doing and that's gone into setting up the office. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kirbian.
Great. And I did just get a note from the clerk advising that this presentation is available online on the meeting page, which you can find. Okay, so as this item does not require a decision, this brings us to the end of our agenda. And just a reminder that this is the last scheduled meeting of this committee until it is reconstituted after the civic election. May we have...
Motion to adjourn?
Thank you, Councillor Hardwick. Those in favor, yay.
Yay.
Opposed?
Yay.
Motion carries unanimously, and this meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
And
Thanks.
thank you to